This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
Oil prices fell over 1% lower on Friday and recorded for their biggest weekly losses since the end of March, as traders turned cautious ahead of an OPEC Plus meeting to decide the group's output policy for June. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures settled 95 cents, or 1.6%, to settle at $58.29 a barrel. Brent crude futures closed down 84 cents, or 1.4%, at $61.29 a barrel. For the week, Brent fell over 8% and WTI lost about 7.7%. The OPEC Plus meeting was moved up to Saturday from the original plan of Monday, three sources told Reuters on Friday, although it was not clear why the meeting was rescheduled.
The Trump administration will revise a Biden-era rule that required the oil and gas industry to provide nearly $7 billion in new financial assurances to cover the cost of decommissioning old infrastructure, the Interior Department said on Friday. In a statement, the agency said it would develop a new regulation, but did not give specifics. The move is aligned with President Donald Trump's push to reduce federal regulations and boost domestic energy production. This revision will enable our nation's energy producers to redirect their capital toward future leasing, exploration, and production, all while financially protecting the American taxpayer, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum said in the statement.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
U.S. President Donald Trump's administration on Friday proposed cutting billions of dollars in federal funding next year for projects including renewable energy and electric vehicle chargers, and gutting programs aimed at curbing climate change. The proposal to Congress was part of a wider request to cut $163 billion in 2026 federal spending, slashing more than a fifth of non-military spending. The White House said the energy budget proposal cancels more than $15 billion in carbon capture and renewable energy funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law that former President Joe Biden, a Democrat, signed in 2021. It also proposes to cancel $6 billion from that law for EV chargers.
4 cargoes of liquefied natural gas headed for Europe changed course to Asia in the last 2 weeks, after European prices fell below the Asian benchmark and opened up an arbitrage for deliveries eastward, according to analysts and shipping data. More cargoes diverting from the Atlantic to the Pacific would increase competition between the two basins, in a year when Europe may need up to an extra 250 LNG cargoes to refill its depleted gas stores ahead of winter. A combination of improved netbacks to Asia and easing European price support, rather than stronger Asian demand, had led to a clear, if narrow, economic case for redirection, said Go Katayama, principal insight analyst at data analytics firm Kepler. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Gold edged lower on Friday and was headed for a second consecutive weekly loss as easing trade tensions between the U.S. and China and a strong jobs report kept prices pressured. Spot gold was down 0.4% at $3,228.50 an ounce as of 1:41 p.m. Eastern Time, 17:41 GMT. Prices were down 2.6% weekly, after hitting a record $3,500.05 on April 22. It hit its lowest since April 14 on Thursday. U.S. gold futures settled 0.6% higher at $3,243.30. China's Commerce Ministry said the U.S. has repeatedly expressed willingness to negotiate on tariffs and that Beijing's door is open for talks.
Copper prices moved higher on Friday on signs that the US and China were moving closer to a solution to their fractious trade war. 3-month copper on the London Metal Exchange gained 2% to $9,387 per metric ton by 16:10 GMT after rising by nearly 1% in the previous session. On Wednesday, copper slid more than 3% in the wake of weak data from top metals consumer China and worries about US tariffs dampening global growth.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
The condition of French winter grain crops was stable in the week to April 28 and still much better than a year ago when crops were damaged by rain, France Agri mayor said on Friday. Ratings for soft wheat crops showed 74% were in good or excellent condition by April 28, stable from a week earlier and up from 63% a year ago, the Farm Office said in a weekly report. French winter barley and durum wheat crops were also stable, with good or excellent ratings at 70% and 76% respectively by Monday. That was up from 66% for both crops a year earlier.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.